In Laboratory Reddit, today's story is...
I suffered depression from my brother's bullying. I exposed it at his pregnancy announcement and my family collapsed. I have just returned from a family gathering where everything became very tense and uncomfortable. I expressed many things that I had kept inside for years, and now I need to know whether I acted correctly or not. To give you some context, I am 25 years old and I work as a model, having participated in several fashion shows and projects over the last few years. This career was something unexpected for me, considering that for a long time I was the butt of jokes because of my weight. I like to call this part of my life the friend story, as I really struggled with obesity until I began my process of change at the age of 20. The road was not easy. It took me about 2 years to reach a healthy weight, and when I was 22, a photographer friend from school offered me my first modeling opportunity. From that moment on, my life took a new turn and I discovered my true passion. I am proud of my transformation and I am healthy, but I want to make something very clear: my success is due to my own efforts and the support of those who believed in me, not those who hurt me. I didn't lose weight for those who bullied me, I did it for the people who supported me. Anyone who thinks otherwise is completely wrong. The person who tormented me the most was, sadly, someone from my own family, my brother Jake, who is now 30 years old. He was always someone who, despite being in good physical shape, had an unpleasant personality. From an early age, he was constantly looking for ways to belittle me, and he found his perfect opportunity during my adolescence when I started to gain weight at puberty. He would make hurtful comments about my body, my face, my weight, and every time he saw me eating, he would make pig noises at me. When I complained to my parents, they minimized the situation, saying that they were just joking and that I should be less sensitive. Eventually, I resigned myself to it and stopped complaining. The bullying was constant, not only at home but also at school, where teenagers can be incredibly cruel when they set their minds to it. I became an easy target for everyone, which destroyed my self-esteem. I began to hate myself and to isolate myself from the world, trying to make myself invisible. I realize now that I was probably depressed for much of my adolescence. The worst part was that I developed a very complicated relationship with food. I would alternate between periods of extreme fasting trying to lose weight and binging on junk food when the hunger became unbearable, which made me feel terrible about myself. This situation didn't improve until I got to university, where people started to value me more for my personality than for my appearance. That's when I changed my approach. Instead of obsessing about losing weight, I decided to focus on being healthy. That change in mindset was exactly what I needed. With the support of my friends, I was able to rebuild my life. I became more sociable and got through that dark period. I know I'm going on a bit about this part, but it's important to understand what I went through. Throughout this process, Jake and my parents never supported me. Jake continued his bullying and my parents never intervened or did anything to help me with my confidence. They either ignored the situation or insisted that I was too sensitive. For a long time, I described my relationship with my parents as complicated, but recently I realized that it was actually toxic. I always tried to justify them in my mind, but today I finally understood that they didn't deserve it because they were simply mean to me. I should have walked away from them a long time ago, but I kept in touch just for appearance's sake. I continued to attend family gatherings, visit them on special occasions, and even went to Jake's wedding last year. I did it all because they asked me to, and for that same reason, I attended their pregnancy announcement party today. Everything was going along normally until a relative commented on how surprising it was to see how successful I had become, mentioning my recent participation in an important fashion show, especially considering my previous appearance. I often get similar comments from relatives who are not very aware of how inappropriate they can be. I usually just smile and let it go. However, my parents took advantage of the moment to defend Jake, probably because he was still the same loser as ever and the business they had helped him start was on the verge of collapse, needing their financial help. As he was going through a bad time and they didn't want him to feel bad about the compliments about my career, they made a comment that made me lose my temper. They suggested that I should be grateful to my brother, arguing that I owed my current career to his tough love that had motivated me to lose weight. That comment infuriated me because, in reality, he had psychologically tortured me for years, contributing significantly to my depression and lack of motivation. As I mentioned before, it wasn't the bullies who helped me, but the people who supported me, and he definitely wasn't one of them. At that moment, I lost control and decided to expose everything he had put me through. I laughed ironically at my parents' comment, asked them if they really believed that, and proceeded to relate in detail everything I had suffered. Everyone was shocked to hear the true extent of his cruelty. When I finished, I simply left without saying anything more because there was nothing more to add. Now my parents keep sending me messages, accusing me of exaggerating and saying that it wasn't necessary to reveal all that, especially in front of my pregnant sister-in-law who will gain weight during her pregnancy. Apparently, my sister-in-law is upset with Jake and refuses to talk to him until he apologizes to me. My parents accuse me of seeking attention and sympathy, saying that I have embarrassed the family for no reason and that I did all this out of spite. Honestly, I don't know what to think anymore. Am I the bad guy for exposing the bullying I suffered at the hands of my brother during a family celebration? Addition, I need to clarify a few things. I have a good relationship with my sister-in-law. When I met her, I was surprised she was with someone like Jake. She is a kind and eloquent person, and sometimes I think I should have warned her about him, although that probably would have meant being permanently excluded from the family. The reason my relatives were so surprised by my revelation is that they really didn't know how bad the bullying was at home. Jake was smart enough not to behave like that in front of other relatives or guests, and my parents, very concerned about their image, forbade me to talk about it outside the house. They couldn't allow their son to be seen openly bullying his sister. Many people ask me why I continued to keep in touch with my parents despite the abuse. As I explained, I did it because I believed that a complicated relationship was better than none at all. You may call me weak, but I always sought their validation from an early age. Like many people who grow up in toxic homes, it took me a long time to realize that this situation was not normal and that I should not accept it. I also want to respond to those who criticize me for calling my brother a loser and brainless, suggesting that I am no better than he is. The difference is that I never sought him out to hurt him for his shortcomings. It is true that academically he was never as good as me and he frequently failed subjects. He was not particularly bright or hardworking, and apparently he is still the same, considering that our parents had to finance his business when he quit his job a couple of years ago, a business that is now failing. I don't know the details, but something went wrong. However, I never made fun of his failures during our adolescence until he started to harass me. When I responded, the situations ended in verbal arguments where I ended up crying while he laughed, or on more serious occasions, with him physically assaulting me, because although I was older, he was much stronger. Therefore, his constant bullying was very different from me calling him a loser in response. In conclusion, I hope this clears up any doubts. Although my parents' comments made me doubt myself, after reading the responses here, I realize that I have nothing to feel guilty or regretful about. Update 1. I have lived with this situation for so long that I almost forgot that I have every right to talk about what happened to me, or rather, what they made me go through because Jake was an insecure bully and my parents were spineless people who preferred their problem son to their daughter. Now that the truth has come out, they just regret being exposed and having everyone know their true nature. But that's their responsibility. If they didn't want to be seen as the villains of my story, they should have treated me better. They should have known that eventually I would talk about everything they put me through, and honestly, I'm glad I did. I have no regrets now. 2 days ago I had my doubts, but now that I've had time to reflect, I realize that this was inevitable. After reading the comments, I talked to my friends about what I had done, and they supported me too. They assured me that I did the right thing and that they deserved this, if not something worse. With that in mind, I blocked everyone except my sister-in-law. As I mentioned before, she and I have a normal relationship and she has done nothing wrong. She is simply married to the person I detest the most. I am convinced that he is completely different in front of her, which is why she ended up marrying him. From the look on her face as I told my story at the party, she probably didn't know that her husband was capable of behaving like that. That's why I didn't block her, and although I don't know what will happen, I hope she sees him for who he really is. I wouldn't suggest that she leave him because it's unlikely given that they are expecting a child together, and I wouldn't want my future nephew or niece to have a life like that. But I do think she should recognize what kind of person he is and do something to help him change. The condition she set, as my parents told me, that he must apologize to me before she talks to him again, seems fair to me. If he were a decent person, he would have apologized by now. But at this point I know I shouldn't expect anything human from him. I'm sure he must be arguing with his wife about this even now. Either way, I don't care if he apologizes or not, because neither of them exists for me anymore. I have realized that I don't need this kind of person in my life. They have done nothing but complicate it since I was a child. In fact, it is absurd for my parents to say that I have embarrassed the family, when in reality I am the one who is ashamed of being related to them and having to call them family. All my life they have favored my brother in every way, and I am finally beginning to see it clearly. So congratulations to them. They can keep their favorite son. I'm out of here. I'm not going to justify their problematic behavior just because they're my parents. Update 2. I'm glad I didn't block my sister-in-law because it's been a few days since my last update, almost a week since the incident, and she contacted me today. She wrote to me in the morning asking if we could have lunch together. Although I hesitated at first, I accepted and she suggested a restaurant near my office. Just to clarify any doubts, I work as a stylist's assistant when I'm not modeling. We agreed to meet there to catch up. I didn't know what to expect, so I was nervous all morning before lunch. When we finally met, I noticed that she was very different. She is usually outgoing and talkative, but this time she seemed subdued. After we ordered, she told me how sorry she was for everything that had happened. I assured her that she didn't need to apologize, as she didn't know anything about it. And even if she had known, she would have had no reason to apologize since she hadn't done anything to me personally. She had no responsibility for what had happened in the past, and I bore her no ill will. Suddenly, she broke down emotionally and told me that she had been arguing with Jake all week since the incident because he stubbornly refused to apologize to me. He argued that every time he called me fat, I responded by calling him stupid and other similar things, trying to make him feel bad about his insecurities. Therefore, he believed we were even and, like any reasonable person, my sister-in-law did not agree with that logic. Because, in the end, he admitted that he initiated the aggressions and I was only defending myself. Despite this, he still refused to apologize to me because he said he didn't like me and I had nothing to do with it, so he didn't feel the need to. According to him, my behavior at the party canceled out all of the above, because apparently I had already had my revenge and now we could consider it a draw. Obviously this is just his selfishness talking. It's impossible that he really believes in these excuses. He just doesn't want to apologize because he thinks it will make him look weak. My sister-in-law confessed to me that she is exhausted trying to deal with him because she is trying to get him to do the right thing and they have been arguing about it for days, and she is reaching her limit. I had to comfort her because it was clear that she was going through a very difficult time, and if I were in her place, I would probably feel the same way. I tried to explain to her that she didn't have to fight with him for me because I had already closed that chapter. I expected nothing from him or from my parents, and I wouldn't judge her if she maintained a normal relationship with him. After all, she had gotten to know a different side of him and, despite my personal experience, I couldn't deny that he could behave differently with other people. But she told me that she simply couldn't see him in the same way anymore, especially now with the pregnancy underway. Because she knew that she was going to put on a considerable amount of weight, and if this was the kind of person he was going to become when she also put on weight, she would have to reconsider her whole relationship with him. She explained that the women in her family tend to put on weight quickly, and she has also had her own problems with weight, although not as serious as mine. That's why she finds this equally offensive and is so determined to correct his behavior. I didn't know what to say to her, so I just listened to her in silence and let her express her feelings. After a while, I noticed that I had to get ready to go back to work. I assured her that we would keep in touch and wanted her to know that even if he didn't apologize to me, I was completely okay with that. I understood why she wanted me to do it, but even if I didn't, she could handle the situation as she saw fit and didn't have to do anything on my own. Because all I wanted was for her and the baby to be happy and healthy, I didn't want her to stress out about this. She seemed truly relieved at the end of our conversation and expressed her gratitude to me for talking to her and for being so kind despite how cruel my brother had been to me all this time. We already had a good relationship and this has only strengthened it, because I feel like we know each other on a deeper level now. I feel like we really understand each other, and although it's sad that we've been brought together by experiences of body shaming, at least we're best friends now. And I honestly hope that things between her and my brother improve, not for his sake, but for hers. She's a really sweet person and I can see that she genuinely loves him, so for that reason, I really hope everything works out. Update 3. Hi, it's been 2 weeks since my last update. During this time, I've been very busy with an upcoming new show, rehearsals, and related activities. I had managed to put the whole thing with my brother and my parents out of my mind, concentrating on my work and other aspects of my life. My sister-in-law and I were still in touch, and she told me that she had decided to stay for a few days with her parents because she needed a break from everything. Jake was apparently very upset, but he still refused to apologize to me. However, on the 4th day, which is today, it seems that he changed his mind. This morning I received a call from an unknown number, and at first I didn't answer, as I don't usually answer calls from numbers I don't recognize, especially early in the morning. But then I received a message saying it was him and that he needed me to answer because he wanted to apologize. When he called back a few seconds later, I answered and was really surprised. I knew that if he asked me to answer the call to apologize, it meant that he was willing to do so genuinely. If it wasn't like that, he could have simply sent me a text message and left it at that. When he spoke, I could tell he was uncomfortable. He explained that over the last few days he had been very stubborn and had continued arguing with his wife because he didn't want to apologize to me. He assumed that I was aware of this because my sister-in-law had told him that we were in contact. And although I didn't care whether he apologized or not, she did. She had told him not to bother contacting her until he had done as he was asked. And once he did, once he apologized, I would call her myself to let her know. But until then, she would stay with her parents and not speak to him. And she kept her word. She hadn't spoken to him since she left. He had received all her calls and messages and had been left completely alone to reflect on what he wanted to do. Since then, he had been thinking about the whole situation and decided it was best to apologize to me. Because in the end, even though neither of us cared much about the other, it was clear that this meant a lot to his wife. I couldn't help but ask him if he was apologizing just because his wife wanted him to or if he really wanted to. He took a moment to think about it and then replied, honestly, that it was a combination of both. He told me that he wouldn't have considered apologizing if his wife hadn't insisted so much. And then, because he had refused for so long, he had the opportunity to reflect on his actions. Finally, he had decided that it would be the right thing to apologize because he was about to start a new phase in his life as a father and he wanted to do it the right way. He confessed to me that he had really regretted how he had treated me during our adolescence and how much he had bullied me. But he never thought of apologizing or making up with me because there was simply no reason to do so, and he didn't want to appear weak, which he thought would happen if he apologized. He was also convinced that I was as much of a bully as he was because I used to comment on his intelligence. But obviously that wasn't the case because he always initiated the provocations. In short, he acknowledged that he had been wrong and wanted to take this moment to apologize for everything he had said in the past and how he had treated me. I didn't tell him that I forgave him or anything similar. I simply told him that I would pass the message on to his wife, and we ended the call. For me, it didn't really matter if the apology was completely sincere or not. You know, sincere enough. I just wanted the best for my sister-in-law because personally, as I said, I don't really care about his apology. So this was more for her than for me. After the call, I contacted my sister-in-law, told her everything, and she seemed happier. She thanked me, and that was it. And honestly, I'm glad Jake decided to stop being so stubborn and apologize. Because he was right about one thing, he should start his journey as a father the right way. And I'm glad he decided to make things right with his wife instead of letting the situation get worse. I hope they can fully resolve everything and that they will soon be properly back together again. Update 4. Hi, it's been 6 months since my last update. And although Jake apologized, my parents haven't bothered to talk to me, and I'm glad they haven't, because I don't want to talk to them either. However, we are going to have to see each other, unfortunately, because my sister-in-law is organizing a baby shower and she has invited me. I was thinking of not going and apologizing to her afterwards, but she told me I had to be there. So it looks like we're all going to have a happy little get-together. Honestly, I haven't even seen my parents since the night of the party. So I don't know what it will be like now. I just hope nothing awkward happens this time. Update 5. Hi, I attended the baby shower yesterday. And fortunately it wasn't as awkward as I had imagined. I stayed close to my sister-in-law and her friends most of the time, and I had to interact occasionally with my brother, which was a bit uncomfortable, but manageable. As for my parents, we kept completely away from each other and didn't even say hello. And that's fine with me, because as I said, I don't want to talk to them either. It's enough that I've decided to maintain a cordial relationship with my brother, and I do that solely out of consideration for my sister-in-law. She has been extraordinarily kind to me. Over the last few months, our friendship has grown so strong that I now consider her one of my closest friends. For this reason, I have decided to make peace with my brother too. And I must admit that he has shown more tolerable behavior, so I guess people really can change.